My name is Mercedes, and at 32 years old, I thought I had everything figured out. A loving husband of 5 years, a successful career, and what I believed was a stable family. Despite my complicated relationship with my younger sister, Natalie. But my carefully planned birthday dinner turned into the moment my entire world collapsed around me. In front of everyone we knew, my own sister stood up, touched her belly, and revealed she was carrying my husband James' baby. Let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button as I share how my perfect life shattered in an instant. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, as the eldest daughter in our middle-class family, I learned early that love came with conditions. From the moment my parents brought Natalie home when I was 4 years old, the dynamics shifted. What was once a home where I felt special became a place where I constantly had to prove my worth. My parents never tried to hide their favoritism. Natalie was their miracle baby, born after my mother had been told she might not conceive again. Perhaps that explains why they treated her differently from the start. While I had to earn every bit of attention through perfect grades, helping around the house, and being the responsible one, Natalie received love unconditionally. She was excused from chores because she was too young, then too sensitive, then too busy with her social life. When she made mistakes, they were quickly forgiven and often laughed about as endearing quirks. My mistakes, however minor, became lectures about responsibility and setting a good example. I still remember my 8th grade science project. I had spent weeks building a working model of a solar system with moving planets. Like in Seaman, like in Haven. The night before the competition, Natalie, then 9, knocked it over during one of her tantrums. The planets shattered, and the careful wiring I had done with my father was ruined. Instead of helping me fix it or even acknowledging my distress, my parents spent the evening comforting Natalie because she felt bad about what she had done. I stayed up until 3 in the morning trying to salvage what I could, only to receive a participation certificate the next day while the intact projects won awards. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. The Christmas I received the doll I had been asking for all year, only to find it in Natalie's room the next day with marker all over its face. The birthday parties where my parents invited my entire class but spent the whole time making sure Natalie was having fun. The time I saved up from my babysitting job to buy a special dress for my first high school dance, and Natalie borrowed it without asking, spilled punch on it, and returned it ruined. As we entered our teenage years, the pattern evolved but never disappeared. When I was 16, my best friend Amanda suddenly stopped calling me. I later discovered Natalie had been inviting her over when I wasn't home, sharing secrets I had told her about Amanda, turning her against me. 2 weeks after my first real boyfriend broke up with me before senior prom, he was dating Natalie. My parents thought it was sweet that he was taking her despite their age difference. College should have been my escape, but the pattern followed me there too. I worked part-time jobs to pay for my textbooks and living expenses, while my parents covered everything for Natalie when she started college 2 years later. They attended every one of her events, but made it to only 2 of mine in 4 years, citing the distance as too challenging. Despite everything, I tried to maintain a relationship with my sister. I told myself she acted from insecurity, that she needed to feel special, that it wasn't entirely her fault our parents had created this dynamic. Part of me hoped that as adults, we could finally become the close sisters I had always wanted us to be. I believed that my love for her could overcome the patterns of our childhood. After college, I focused on building my marketing career. I worked hard, earned promotions, and created a life for myself that felt stable and fulfilling. Then, at a work conference in Seattle, I met James. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in me for who I was. After years of feeling second best, his focus on me felt like healing. Our romance progressed quickly, from coffee meetings to weekend trips to moving in together within a year. When we got married, Natalie served as my maid of honor, though she seemed distant throughout the wedding planning and the ceremony itself. I chalked it up to her being busy with her own life, and perhaps a twinge of jealousy that I was settling down first. My parents spent more time worrying about whether Natalie was enjoying herself at my wedding than checking if I needed anything as the bride. The 5 years that followed were the happiest of my life. James and I bought our first home, a charming craftsman with a yard where we talked about our future children playing. We both advanced in our careers, supporting each other through late nights and stressful projects. We traveled, made friends as a couple, and built what I thought was an unshakable foundation. When I received a promotion to senior marketing manager, I decided my 32nd birthday deserved a special celebration. Not just for the promotion or the age milestone, but because I finally felt secure in who I was and what I had built. I hoped that sharing this moment with my family might help heal some of the tensions, especially with Natalie, who had become increasingly distant over the past year. Little did I know that this celebration would become the scene of my greatest humiliation and pain. Planning my birthday celebration became a welcome distraction from the subtle changes I had noticed in my marriage. I secured a reservation at La Maison, Portland's most upscale French restaurant, known for its intimate atmosphere and exquisite cuisine. I wanted everything to be perfect, a reflection of how far I had come and the life I had built. I took the day before my birthday off work to prepare. The morning started with shopping for the perfect dress, something that made me feel beautiful and confident. After trying on numerous options, I found it. A midnight blue cocktail dress with delicate beading that caught the light when I moved. It was more than I usually spent on clothing, but this celebration felt important enough to justify the splurge. In the afternoon, I had appointments at my favorite salon for hair and makeup. As I sat in the stylist's chair watching my transformation, I couldn't help but think about James and how he had been acting over the past few weeks. He had been working late more often than usual, keeping his phone close and angled away from me when texting. Our conversations felt strained, with long pauses and vague answers to direct questions. 3 days before my birthday, I had noticed a text notification from someone saved simply as N pop up on his phone while he was in the shower. When I mentioned seeing it later, the notification had mysteriously disappeared, and James dismissed my concerns, saying it was probably a work colleague and that I was being paranoid. I had confronted him that morning before leaving for my appointments. We were in the kitchen, the sunlight streaming through the windows creating a deceptive sense of warmth despite the tension between us. My voice has been carefully casual as I asked, "What time will you be home tonight? I want to make sure we have time to get ready for tomorrow." He barely looked up from his coffee. "Work is crazy right now with the Westfield account. Might be late. Don't wait up." "Is everything okay, James? You seem distant lately." His response was too quick, too rehearsed. "Just stressed about work. This new client is demanding." His eyes never quite met mine. "Are you sure that's all? You know you can talk to me about anything." For a second, something flickered across his face, guilt, regret, but it was gone so quickly I convinced myself I had imagined it. "Mercedes, not everything is a deep issue to analyze. Sometimes work is just work, and stress is just stress." He had checked his watch then, making a show of being late. "Gotta go. Have fun today. Well, talk more tonight." But we hadn't talked more that night. He had texted around 7 saying he was still at the office and would grab dinner with colleagues. When he finally came home after 11, he slipped into bed without a word, pretending to be asleep when I stirred. I pushed these thoughts away as I left the salon, determined to focus on my birthday excitement instead of my growing concerns. The reservations were made for 12 people, my closest friends Rachel, Samantha, and Michael, my parents, my cousin Taylor, and a few colleagues I had grown close to. I had invited Natalie weeks ago, but she had given a vague excuse about being busy, which didn't surprise me given our recent distance. That morning, however, I received an unexpected call from her. "Hey Mercedes, happy early birthday," she had said, her voice unusually bright. "Thanks, Natalie. I was surprised to hear from her at all. So, I know this is last minute, but my plans changed for tomorrow. Is it too late to join your dinner?" The request caught me off guard. "Of course you can come." I was momentarily hopeful that this might be a sign of reconciliation between us. "It'll be great to have you there." There was a pause on the line. "Is James looking forward to it?" The question seemed odd. Of course, why wouldn't he be? "No reason. Just making conversation. See you tomorrow then." After hanging up, I immediately called James to let him know about Natalie's sudden change of plans. His response was strange. His voice strained as he claimed to be in a meeting and quickly ended the call. That afternoon, while getting dressed for a pre-birthday dinner with James, which he later canceled, I noticed my expensive new earrings were missing from my jewelry box. I had purchased them during a shopping trip with Rachel the previous month, a pair of sapphire studs that matched my eyes, according to the salesperson. I searched everywhere but couldn't find them. Rachel called while I was still looking, wanting to confirm details for the next day. I could hear the genuine excitement in her voice. "I'm so looking forward to celebrating you tomorrow, Mercedes. You deserve every bit of happiness." Thanks, Rachel. Her unwavering support had been a constant throughout my life. I'm excited too, just dealing with some weird energy from James lately. Pre-birthday jitters? Or is it something more? I hesitated. Probably nothing. Just stress. Anyway, well, see you tomorrow at 7. After the call, I continued my final preparations. Despite the nagging worries, I felt beautiful as I got dressed. The new dress fit perfectly, and my hair and makeup from the salon appointment looked flawless. Standing before the mirror, I took a deep breath, trying to center myself in gratitude for all the good in my life. I had no idea that in 24 hours, that life would be unrecognizable. La Maison was even more beautiful than I remembered. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the cream-colored walls adorned with tasteful French artwork. The maitre d' recognized my name immediately and escorted me to the private dining room I had reserved, where white linen tablecloths and gleaming silverware awaited our party. Fresh flower arrangements centered each table setting, and soft classical music played in the background. I arrived 15 minutes early to ensure everything was perfect. The first to join me were my friends Rachel, Samantha, and Michael, arriving together with beautifully wrapped gifts and warm hugs. "Happy birthday, gorgeous," Rachel exclaimed, embracing me tightly. She had been my rock since college, the sister I wished I had grown up with. The deep burgundy dress she wore complemented her auburn hair perfectly. 32 looks good on you," Samantha added with a grin, handing me a small package I knew would contain something thoughtful and unique. She had an uncanny knack for finding gifts that spoke directly to the recipient's personality. Michael, tall and kind-hearted, gave me a quick hug. "The place looks amazing, Mercedes. You outdid yourself." As we settled in, I checked my phone to see a text from James. "Running late. Unavoidable work meeting came up. Start without me. Be there. As soon as possible." I felt a twist of disappointment but smiled for my friends. James is running a bit behind. Work stuff. Rachel raised an eyebrow but said nothing, always perceptive about the undercurrents in my life. My parents arrived next, my mother immediately looking around the room before even greeting me. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said, kissing my cheek lightly. "Is Natalie here yet?" The question stung, as always. "No, Mom. She said she would come, though. I got a call from her yesterday." "Oh, good," my mother brightened visibly. "It will be nice to have everyone together." My father gave me a distracted pat on the shoulder, his attention already on his phone. "Happy birthday, kiddo. Nice place." He scanned the room. "Your husband? Not here yet?" "Hez on his way. Work meeting." My father nodded absently, typing something on his phone. I excused myself to greet other arriving guests, fighting back the familiar feeling of invisibility I always experienced around my parents. Cousin Taylor arrived with a burst of energy that instantly lifted my spirits. Unlike my parents, Taylor truly saw me, and always had. "Birthday girl," she wrapped me in a genuine hug. "You look absolutely stunning. That dress is everything." For the next 20 minutes, I checked my watch repeatedly and made increasingly awkward excuses for James' absence. The waiter had already offered drinks and appetizers, and everyone was seated except for the 2 empty chairs reserved for James and Natalie. Just as I was about to suggest we order, the door to our private dining room opened dramatically. Natalie stood there in a skin-tight red dress that accentuated her slender figure, her long blonde hair styled in loose waves. Every head turned to look at her. Conversation momentarily pausing. "Sorry, I'm late," she announced, as though being the last to arrive was a planned grand entrance. Traffic was just brutal. She air-kissed my cheek before making her way around the table, greeting everyone effusively. I couldn't help but notice how she looked different somehow. Her skin had a particular glow, and she had cut her hair since I last saw her. But what caught my eye most was the jewelry she wore specifically, the sapphire earrings that looked exactly like my missing pair. Surely, it was a coincidence. Sapphires weren't uncommon. Throughout her greetings, I noticed how she kept touching her stomach subtly. She also exchanged meaningful glances with my parents, who seemed unusually attentive to her. My mother kept looking at Natalie with a soft expression I rarely saw directed at me. Nearly an hour after the reservation time, James finally arrived. His hair was slightly disheveled, his tie loosened, and his expression flustered. He apologized to the room in general before giving me a stiff kiss on the cheek that felt more like a formality than affection. "Sorry, babe, couldn't be helped," he muttered before taking his seat. As he sat down, I caught a strange look passing between him and Natalie. It was brief but undeniable, a loaded glance containing some shared knowledge. My stomach tightened, but I forced a smile as the first course was served. The dinner itself was everything I had hoped for culinarily. The chef had prepared a special tasting menu featuring delicate seafood appetizers, rich French onion soup, perfectly cooked filet mignon, and seasonal vegetables prepared with expert technique. The wine pairing complemented each course beautifully. Yet, despite the exquisite food, an undeniable tension permeated the table. James barely spoke, responding to direct questions with one-word answers. Natalie, by contrast, was unusually animated, dominating conversations and repeatedly steering topics toward herself. She kept touching her stomach in a way that seemed deliberate, almost performative. My friends noticed the strange dynamics. Rachel squeezed my hand under the table when Natalie interrupted me for the third time. Samantha raised her eyebrows at me across the table when James flinched as Natalie said his name during a story about her work. I tried to maintain the cheerful birthday atmosphere, asking questions about my friends' lives, thanking everyone for coming, and commenting on the excellent food. But with each passing minute, my anxiety grew. Something wasn't right. The pieces didn't fit together, but my mind refused to assemble the puzzle, perhaps knowing instinctively that I wouldn't like the complete picture. As the meal concluded, a waiter wheeled in a gorgeous cake decorated with fresh berries and delicate chocolate work. Everyone sang happy birthday, their voices creating a strange discordant melody that matched the discomfort I felt. As I looked around the table at the faces of my loved ones, I noticed my mother's gaze fixed not on me but on Natalie, who was whispering something to my father. James was staring at his plate, seemingly unable to meet my eyes. I blew out the candles with a smile plastered on my face, feeling increasingly like an actress in someone else's play. The room erupted in applause, but the sound felt hollow, distant, as though I were hearing it from underwater. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come. As the waiter began cutting the cake, I stood up, glass in hand, feeling I should say something to mark the occasion. Despite the strange undercurrents, this was still my birthday celebration, and I wanted to express my gratitude to those who had come. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady despite my inner turmoil. At 32, I'm grateful for so many things: my career, my friends, my family. I looked at my parents, who smiled politely but seemed distracted, and most of all, my wonderful husband. I turned to James, whose face had gone pale. 5 years together, and I'm looking forward to many more, hopefully with the family we've been talking about starting soon. James coughed and reached for his water, nearly knocking it over. My friends clapped enthusiastically, while my parents exchanged an unreadable look. Natalie stared at her plate, a strange smile playing at the corners of her lips. I raised my glass higher, to another year of growth, love, and happiness. Everyone echoed the toast, and I sat down to blow out the candles on my cake. The room filled with applause as I made a wish not for anything grand, but simply for clarity and peace in the confusing situation I sensed around me. As the applause died down and the waiter began serving cake slices, Natalie suddenly stood up, tapping her glass with a spoon. The sharp ringing cut through the chatter, and all eyes turned to her. "I also have something I'd like to say," she announced, her voice carrying an unmistakable note of triumph. "Since we're all here together, this seems like the perfect time for my news." The room fell silent. Even the waiters paused in their movements, sensing the tension. "We're expecting," Natalie said, placing a hand deliberately on her still flat stomach. I'm 3 months pregnant and so excited to become a mother. For a brief, confused moment, I felt happy for her. I didn't know she was seeing anyone seriously, but pregnancy explained the glow I'd noticed. I smiled supportively, ready to congratulate her, when she continued speaking. And James, she turned directly to my husband, her eyes locking with his. I know we wanted to wait to tell everyone, but I just can't hold it in anymore. You're going to be such an amazing father to our baby. Time stopped. The room around me seemed to blur at the edges, voices becoming muffled as though I were suddenly underwater. I stared at Natalie, then at James, waiting for one of them to laugh, to say it was a terrible joke, to explain that I had misunderstood. But James' face confirmed everything before he spoke. The guilt, the fear, the relief of finally having the secret exposed all flickered across his features in rapid succession. Around us, the reactions varied from stunned silence to audible gasps. Rachel whispered "Jesus Christ" under her breath. Samantha's fork clattered loudly against her plate. Michael stared open-mouthed between James and Natalie. My colleague Sandra gripped the edge of the table, while her husband Ben stared at his lap, clearly wishing to be anywhere else. But it was my parents' reactions that truly destroyed me. There was no shock on their faces, no outrage, no protective instinct for their elder daughter who had just been publicly humiliated. Instead, my father stood and placed a supportive hand on Natalie's shoulder. My mother covered her mouth, but not in horror. Her eyes crinkled at the edges in what could only be described as suppressed happiness. James finally stood, swaying slightly. "It's true," he said, his voice barely audible. "We've been seeing each other for about 8 months now." He couldn't meet my eyes. "We didn't plan for this to happen. The pregnancy, I mean, but we're..." He trailed off, unable to finish. Natalie's hand moved to cover my father's on her shoulder. She met my gaze directly, her expression a mixture of defiance and performative sympathy. "I know this is a shock, Mercedes. We never meant to hurt you." My mother's voice broke through the fog surrounding me. "This is wonderful news, sweetheart," she said, reaching for Natalie's free hand. "Of course. The timing is unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" I whispered, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. My own mother was congratulating my sister on her pregnancy with my husband's child, and the best description she could offer for this betrayal was unfortunate? The room spun around me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself, nausea rising in my throat. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the magnitude of what was happening. Rachel stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Are you fucking kidding me right now?" she demanded, looking between James and Natalie. "And you're all just okay with this?" She gestured toward my parents. I finally found my voice, though it sounded distant even to my own ears. "How could you both do this to me?" It was a simple question, devoid of the screaming and accusations that might have been justified. Just a genuine question born of complete disbelief. Natalie lifted her chin, defensive now. "It just happened. We never meant to hurt you, but when it's real love, you can't fight it." James attempted to speak, his words coming out in a jumbled mess. "We were going to tell you after your birthday. We didn't want to ruin." He stopped, seemingly realizing the absurdity of what he was saying. My mother leaned across the table toward me. "Mercedes, please don't make a scene on Natalie's special day." Her words hit me like a physical blow. My birthday dinner had somehow transformed into Natalie's special day. My celebration had become the backdrop for her announcement. Once again, I was an afterthought in my own life. With as much dignity as I could muster, I stood up, my legs trembling beneath me. Without a word, I picked up my purse, smoothed my dress, and walked out of the private dining room. I didn't run, didn't cry, didn't scream, though every cell in my body wanted to do all three. I simply walked, back straight, head high, tears silently streaming down my face. Behind me, I heard chairs scraping as others stood. Rachel calling my name, my father saying something about letting me cool down. Natalie's voice, surprisingly small now, asking if she'd done something wrong. And through it all, the devastating silence from James. No footsteps following me, no call of my name, no attempt to explain or apologize beyond his pathetic mumblings. As I reached the main entrance of La Maison, Rachel caught up to me, wrapping a protective arm around my shoulders. "Come on, I'm driving you to my place. You shouldn't be alone tonight." I nodded mutely, allowing her to guide me to her car, feeling nothing but a vast emptiness where my heart used to be. The next morning, I woke in Rachel's guest room to momentary confusion. For a blessed few seconds, I didn't remember why I wasn't in my own bed. Why my eyes felt swollen and raw. Why my chest ached with each breath. Then reality crashed back, and I curled into myself, fresh tears coming before I was even fully awake. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen illuminated with notifications. 17 missed calls, 5 from James, 4 from my mother, 2 from my father, 6 from Natalie. 32 text messages, an ironic match to my new age. Voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to, except one that played automatically when I picked up the phone. "Mercedes, this is Natalie." Natalie's voice, clinical and annoyed rather than apologetic. "I think you're being really immature about this whole situation. Things happen, people fall in love. You need to accept reality and be happy for us. Call me when you can be an adult about this." I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. The audacity, the complete lack of remorse, or even basic human empathy was staggering. 8 months. My husband and sister had been having an affair for 8 months, nearly a fifth of my entire marriage. Rachel knocked softly before entering with a mug of coffee and toast I knew I wouldn't eat. She sat beside me on the bed, not speaking, just offering silent support until I was ready. "I can't believe this is real," I finally whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. "It's real, and it's fucking awful, but you're going to get through it," Rachel said, her practicality a strange comfort. "First thing, we need to get some of your stuff from the house. Clothes, important documents, anything you can't live without for a while. You can stay here as long as you need." The thought of going back to the house I shared with James made me physically ill, but I knew she was right. I need my laptop for work, and my birth certificate is in our filing cabinet. Some clothes would be good too. "I'll go with you," Rachel said immediately. "Actually, I'll drive you. You shouldn't be behind the wheel right now." 2 hours later, after I had showered and borrowed clothes from Rachel, we pulled up in front of my house. James' car was in the driveway, which surprised me. I had expected him to be at work, or perhaps at Natalie's. "You don't have to talk to him," Rachel reminded me as we approached the front door. "We're here for your things." That's it. Using my key for what I somehow knew would be one of the last times, I entered the home that no longer felt like mine. James was sitting at the kitchen table, unshaven, still wearing last night's clothes. He jumped up when he saw me, his face a mask of practiced remorse. "Mercedes, thank God. I've been trying to reach you." I walked past him toward the stairs, Rachel close behind me, her presence a shield against his words. "Please, can we talk?" James followed us. "I know I messed up. I know this is bad." "Bad?" I stopped, turning to face him. The word was so inadequate it was almost funny. Burning dinner is bad. Forgetting an anniversary is bad. Sleeping with my sister for 8 months and getting her pregnant is apocalyptic. He flinched. "I never meant for any of this to happen. It just happened?" I interrupted, ice filling my veins. "Like you just happened to lie to me day after day? Like you just happened to betray every vow we made? Like you just happened to destroy my life at my birthday dinner?" James ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "She wasn't supposed to announce it that way. We were going to tell you privately, after your birthday." "Oh, how considerate of you," Rachel interjected, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Husband of the year material right here." I continued up the stairs, determined to gather my things and leave as quickly as possible. In the bedroom, I pulled out a suitcase and began filling it with clothes, toiletries, and shoes. James hovered in the doorway, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "I know you're angry," he said, his tone indicating he thought angry was the extent of my emotional devastation. "But Natalie and we connected in a way I didn't expect. She gets me, you know? She's fun and spontaneous, not always working or planning like me?" I turned to face him, a sweater clutched in my hands. "So this is my fault? I'm too responsible? Too dedicated to my career? Too focused on building a life for us? That's not what I meant, he backpedaled. Just that Natalie and I are more compatible. You seem to find me plenty compatible for 5 years, I said, turning back to my packing. Or were you just settling all along? He had no answer for that. While gathering my important documents from our home office, I noticed our shared computer was still logged in to James' email. A sick curiosity prompted me to look, and what I found confirmed the extent of their betrayal. Hundreds of messages between them dating back nearly a year, hotel receipts, photos I wished I could unsee, credit card statements showing jewelry purchases, weekend getaways, all during times he had claimed to be working. Most devastating was the discovery that James had been using our joint savings, the money we'd been setting aside for a house down payment and eventually children to fund his affair with Natalie. Including, I noted with bitter recognition, the sapphire earrings she had worn to my birthday dinner. They weren't similar to mine. They were mine, given to my sister by my husband. When I confronted James with this evidence, his excuses became even more pathetic. You were always so busy with your career, he said, as though my professional success justified his betrayal. I felt neglected. Natalie made me feel important, desired. And I didn't? I spent 5 years building a life with you, supporting your career moves, planning our future. He looked away. It's different with her. She's more of fun. The word hung in the air between us, reducing our marriage to something that had failed to entertain him sufficiently. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was my father. I answered, hoping against hope for some parental support, some acknowledgement of the pain I was experiencing. Instead, I heard, Mercedes, your mother and I would like you to come to dinner this weekend. We need to discuss how we're going to handle this situation as a family. Handle what situation? My voice was dangerously calm. Well, Natalie's having a baby. My father's tone suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. That changes everything. Family has to come first now. Am not family? I asked, my heart breaking all over again. Of course you are, but you need to understand the bigger picture. Your sister is going to be a mother. She's giving us our first grandchild. He paused. Besides, you and James were having problems anyway, weren't you? My mother must have been listening in, because she suddenly spoke. Sweetheart, you can find someone new. You're still young, but please don't hold grudges. We need to be united for the baby's sake. I ended the call without responding, the final piece of my world collapsing. Not only had I lost my husband and my sister in one blow, but my parents had made it abundantly clear where their loyalties lay. I had truly never belonged. The next 2 weeks passed in a fog. I stayed at Rachel's apartment, cycling through grief, rage, depression, and back again. I cried in the shower so she wouldn't hear me. I barely ate. I lay awake at night, replaying every moment of my marriage, looking for signs I had missed, wondering what I could have done differently. My company offered compassionate leave, which I gratefully accepted. Colleagues sent supportive messages, many expressing outrage on my behalf as the story spread. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with words of encouragement. But even as I received this support, social media showed me another reality. James had moved Natalie into our home barely a week after my birthday disaster. My parents were posting celebratory messages about becoming grandparents, with no mention of the circumstances or consideration for my feelings. Family photos appeared showing the 4 of them together, a united front from which I had been neatly excised. Rock bottom came 3 weeks after my birthday. I was finally feeling strong enough to go grocery shopping alone when I spotted them, James and Natalie, together at the local store, his hand resting possessively on her still flat stomach. I ducked behind a display, watching as they laughed together, picking out food for what had once been my kitchen, planning for a future that had been stolen from me. I left without buying anything, sitting in my car in the parking lot for nearly an hour, tears streaming down my face. It was in that moment, staring at the steering wheel through blurred vision, that something inside me shifted. I realized I was letting them take everything from me, my home, my family, my dignity, my future. And I decided, right then, that enough was enough. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt since before my birthday. While the pain wasn't gone, it had transformed into something harder, more focused, a determination that would fuel my next steps. I showered, dressed in clothes Rachel had lent me, and made 3 phone calls that would change the direction of my life. The first was to Laura Bennett, the divorce attorney notorious in Portland for her tough approach and spectacular results for clients who'd been wronged. Her office scheduled me for an appointment that very afternoon. The second call was to my bank, where I froze the joint accounts James and I shared. Not to be vindictive, but to prevent him from continuing to drain our shared resources to fund his new life with my sister. The third call was to my boss, informing her I would be returning to work the following Monday. The time for hiding was over. Laura Bennett was everything I'd hoped for. Sharp, unsentimental, and laser, focused on protecting my interests. In her sleek downtown office with views of the Willamette River, I laid out the whole story, including the financial discoveries I'd made. "So your husband used joint marital assets to fund his affair with your sister," she summarized, her red pen circling key points in her notes. "And now they've moved her into your marital home, which you are still legally co-owner of and financially responsible for." I nodded, fighting back tears. "I keep wondering what I did wrong, what I could have." Laura cut me off. "Let me stop you right there. This isn't about what you did wrong. This is about what they did wrong. And legally speaking, they did plenty wrong." She turned her computer screen toward me. "Before coming in, I ran a preliminary asset search. Your husband has been systematically moving money out of your joint accounts for months." She showed me records of transfers, credit card statements, withdrawals. James had been methodically siphoning funds, preparing for a life without me long before Natalie's pregnancy announcement. "What bothers me most," Laura continued, "is the house down payment fund. You contributed significantly more to that than he did, correct?" "Yes. I worked extra projects specifically to build that fund faster. I had wanted to buy a larger home where we could start a family." The irony wasn't lost on me. "Well, get that money back," Laura said with confidence, "and more." Her smile was small but fierce. "By the time we're done, Hellwish had kept it in his pants." Over the next week, I gathered financial records, documented James' misuse of our joint funds, and prepared for the divorce proceedings. Laura advised me not to move back into the house yet, but to assert my legal right to it. On a Tuesday afternoon, with Laura by my side, I walked up to my front door and used my key to enter. James and Natalie were in the living room, watching TV on the couch we'd picked out together. Their shock at seeing me was almost comical. "What are you doing here?" Natalie demanded, one hand protectively on her stomach as though I might somehow harm the baby. "This is still legally my home," I replied, my voice steadier than I had expected. "I'm here to inform you both that you have 30 days to find alternative living arrangements." James stood up, face flushed. "You can't just kick us out. Natalie is pregnant." Laura stepped forward, extending her business card. "Mercedes has been more than generous given the circumstances. The courts, however, may not be so understanding, especially when they review how you've been spending marital assets on your affair." Natalie began to cry, the tears looking rehearsed. "This is our home now. You can't do this to us." To the baby. For the first time, I looked directly at my sister, the person I'd grown up with, who had tried to love despite years of favoritism and petty rivalries. I felt nothing but a distant pity. "You did this to us, Natalie. You and James. Actions have consequences." James attempted to intimidate, stepping into my personal space. "We're not leaving. You can try to force us, but your parents will never forgive you." I stood my ground, finding strength I didn't know I had. "Maybe they won't, but I won't forgive myself if I keep letting you take everything from me." The confrontation ended with James and Natalie still protesting, but Laura had served them with the official paperwork. The legal machinery was now in motion, and there was little they could do to stop it. 2 days later, I returned to work, throwing myself into the major project I'd been assigned before my birthday. My boss, Maria, had been incredibly supportive, offering flexibility while making it clear she valued my contributions. "I need to focus on work right now," I told her during our first meeting back. "I need something to pour my energy into." Maria studied me for a moment. How would you feel about leading our new campaign for North Star Athletics? It's high visibility, national scope. Can I handle it? Absolutely. She smiled. Is it exactly the challenge you need right now? Also, yes. The project became my lifeline, a way to rebuild my professional confidence while the personal aspects of my life remained in turmoil. I worked long hours, collaborating with talented colleagues, developing strategy and creative direction that garnered attention throughout the company. Simultaneously, I joined a therapy group for people dealing with betrayal. Twice a week, I sat in a circle with strangers who gradually became friends, each of us processing different versions of similar pain. There was Daniel, whose wife had left him for his brother, Teresa, whose fiancé had been leading a double life, Mark, who discovered his partner of 10 years had been unfaithful throughout their relationship. We never would have met under normal circumstances: a software engineer, an elementary school teacher, a chef, a marketing executive, but our shared experience created a bond that became invaluable to my healing process. They understood the unique pain of being betrayed by multiple people simultaneously, the disorientation of having your entire reality questioned. For 3 months, a temporary restraining order kept James and Natalie in the house while the divorce proceedings advanced, but they were required to pay rent to me through my attorney. During this time, I learned from mutual friends that my parents were still fully supporting James and Natalie, inviting them to family events, helping them prepare for the baby. I received a baby shower invitation, addressed only to Aunt Mercedes, as if my primary identity was now relative to their child. After a particularly difficult therapy session where I broke down describing my parents' ongoing betrayal, my therapist suggested I set clear boundaries with them. The idea terrified me. I'd spent my entire life seeking their approval, but I recognized its necessity for my healing. I invited them to meet me at a neutral coffee shop, away from the house now occupied by my sister and soon-to-be ex-husband. To my surprise, they actually came, looking uncomfortable but present. "I know you love Natalie," I began, my rehearsed speech immediately abandoned as emotions swelled, "and I know you're excited about becoming grandparents. I can't change how you feel, and I won't try to. But I need you to understand that I cannot heal while you embrace the people who betrayed me." My mother reached across the table, her eyes suddenly filled with tears. "Mercedes, we never meant to hurt you. We just didn't know how to handle this impossible situation." "You chose a side, Mom," I said gently. "You chose Natalie, as you've always done. I'm not asking you to choose me now, it's too late for that. I'm just letting you know that I need distance to heal." My father remained stoic, defending Natalie even now. "She's your sister. Blood is thicker than water." Except when it's my blood, apparently. I stood to leave, feeling oddly peaceful. I had said my piece, set my boundary. What they did with that information was up to them. As the divorce proceedings continued, I received unexpected news. The court had granted me exclusive use of the home during the pending divorce, citing James' financial misconduct and the circumstances of the separation. He and Natalie would have to move out immediately. When I finally returned to the house, it felt both familiar and foreign. I walked through each room, taking inventory of what remained and what had been taken. Most of our wedding photos were gone, which was a relief. Many of my personal items had disappeared as well: clothes, jewelry, even some family heirlooms from my grandmother. Instead of feeling defeated, I saw an opportunity. I began redecorating, room by room, removing all traces of James and the life we had shared. I painted the bedroom a color I'd always loved, but he had vetoed. I rearranged the furniture, donated his abandoned clothing, and gradually transformed the space into something that was wholly mine. I also began rebuilding my social life, not just with the therapy group members, but by reconnecting with friends James had subtly isolated me from over the years. I signed up for cooking classes I'd always wanted to take, joined a hiking group that explored the beautiful trails around Portland, and started volunteering at a literacy program for disadvantaged children. With each new activity, each new connection, each small decision made without consideration for anyone else's preferences but my own, I reclaimed pieces of myself that had been submerged during my marriage. I cut my hair short, something James had always opposed. I took a weekend trip to Seattle alone, staying in a luxury hotel just because I wanted to. 6 months after my disastrous birthday dinner, the divorce was finalized. The settlement was heavily in my favor, with James ordered to repay the misappropriated funds plus my legal fees. I kept the house and most of our assets, while he was left with significant debt and child support obligations to Natalie. That evening, I sat on my back porch with Rachel, Taylor, and 2 new friends from my hiking group, sharing a bottle of wine as the sun set. To new beginnings, Rachel toasted, raising her glass. I looked around at these people who had stood by me, who had seen my pain and helped me carry it until I was strong enough to stand on my own again. And for the first time in months, I felt genuine happiness, a quiet joy that was all the more precious for having been so hard won. I raised my glass in return, to finding out how strong you really are. 18 months after my world imploded at La Maison, I stood in the kitchen of my new home, a charming craftsman-style house in a neighborhood I had always loved, but that James had deemed too artsy. The morning light streamed through windows, unobstructed by the heavy drapes my ex-husband had insisted upon. Coffee brewed in the background as I reviewed presentation notes for the meeting I would lead that afternoon. The journey to this moment had been neither straight nor easy. There had been days when grief knocked me flat, when rage consumed me, when the unfairness of it all seemed too heavy to bear. But those days grew fewer and farther between as I rebuilt my life intentionally, brick by careful brick. The divorce settlement had provided financial stability, allowing me to make a substantial down payment on this new home. My promotion to marketing director 6 months earlier had come with a significant salary increase and a team of talented professionals who respected my leadership. The campaign I had thrown myself into during those darkest days had won a national award, cementing my reputation in the industry. My relationship with my parents had undergone its own transformation. My mother had called 3 months after our coffee shop conversation, her voice small and hesitant on the phone. She had come to see, slowly and painfully, how their treatment of me had contributed to Natalie's sense of entitlement. While my father remained more distant, occasionally sending awkward text messages or brief emails, my mother and I had begun rebuilding a relationship based on who we were now rather than the patterns of the past. She had visited my new home twice, each time seeming surprised by the confident, centered woman I had become in the absence of their approval. As for Natalie and James, I had maintained my distance, receiving updates only through mutual acquaintances or occasional, necessary legal communications. Their daughter had been born healthy, followed surprisingly quickly by a second pregnancy. According to Taylor, who remained my connection to family gossip, their relationship had grown strained under the pressures of parenthood and financial struggles. James had been laid off twice, while Natalie complained constantly about the demands of motherhood being more than she had bargained for. I was gathering my things to leave for work when my phone rang with a call from Rachel. "Have you checked your email this morning?" she asked without preamble. "Not yet, why?" "You got the Portland Business Journal's 40 Under 40 award. The announcements just went out." Rach sounded more excited than I felt. "This is huge, Mercedes." I smiled, genuinely pleased, but no longer defined by such external validations. "That's wonderful news. Well, have to celebrate this weekend." After finishing the call, I headed to the airport for a business trip to Chicago. As I waited in the boarding area, scrolling through emails to pass the time, I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I looked up to see James and Natalie standing by a nearby gate, their daughter in a stroller and Natalie visibly pregnant with their second child. James looked tired, deep circles under his eyes, his once immaculate appearance now rumpled and worn. Natalie had gained weight beyond her pregnancy, her face puffy and her expression perpetually dissatisfied. They were clearly returning from somewhere, luggage piled beside them. For a moment, we simply stared at each other across the terminal. I expected to feel something dramatic: pain, rage, vindication. Instead, I felt only a wave of pity, followed by a strange sense of gratitude. Their betrayal, devastating as it had been, had ultimately freed me from a marriage and family dynamics that had been slowly diminishing me. Natalie nudged James and began walking toward me, pushing the stroller with one hand while the other rested on her swollen belly. I remained seated, neither welcoming nor avoiding the encounter. Mercedes, Natalie said as she approached, her tone falsely bright, you look different. Her eyes took in my short hair, my confident posture, my stylish business attire. I smiled politely. Hello, Natalie, James. I acknowledged him with a slight nod. Your daughter is beautiful. James shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, she's great. He couldn't quite meet my eyes. How have you been? Natalie asked. As though we were distant acquaintances running into each other after college, rather than siblings whose last interaction had involved her stealing my husband. I'm doing very well, actually, I replied, my tone pleasant but reserved. Just on my way to Chicago for work. My team's presenting to a major new client. An awkward silence fell, pregnant with all the words that would never be said, the apologies that would never be offered, the relationships that would never be repaired. Well, we should let you get back to your work stuff, Natalie finally said, disappointment evident in her voice. Perhaps she had expected me to be diminished by their betrayal, still broken and bitter. Instead, I sat before them whole and thriving, my life rebuilt into something stronger and more authentic than before. I smiled again, this time with genuine peace. Take care of yourselves, I said, returning to my email as they walked away. As my flight soared over the country that afternoon, I reflected on the painful journey that had led me here. Therapy had been essential, helping me understand that my worth was never dependent on my parents' favoritism, my sister's jealousy, or my husband's fidelity. Books on recovery from betrayal had given me frameworks for processing my grief and rebuilding trust, not just in others, but in my own judgment. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I had met Michael at a charity event for the literacy program where I volunteered. An architect with kind eyes and a thoughtful manner, he had asked questions and genuinely listened to the answers, a novelty after years with James, who had always been more interested in being heard than in hearing. Our relationship had progressed slowly, built on mutual respect and honest communication. After 8 months of dating, I had finally felt ready to introduce him to my friends, who approved wholeheartedly of the way he treated me with consideration and genuine interest. 3 months later, he had met my mother during one of her visits, impressing her with his evident admiration for my independence and strength. Michael had shown me what a healthy partnership truly looked like, one based on choice rather than need, on mutual growth rather than possession. When he told me he loved me for the first time, there were no qualifiers. No suggestions of how I could be better, different, more. Just a simple appreciation for exactly who I was. My cousin Taylor had become more like a sister to me than Natalie had ever been, calling regularly and visiting whenever she was in Portland. Where others might have been torn by family loyalty, she had stood firmly by my side, recognizing the patterns of favoritism that had shaped our family long before the ultimate betrayal. I had come to understand that true family could be chosen, not just born into. The friends who had surrounded me during my darkest moments, Rachel, who had opened her home without hesitation, Samantha, who had checked on me daily during those early weeks, the therapy group members who had witnessed my pain and celebrated my healing, my colleagues who had respected my privacy while offering subtle support. These people were my real family, bound by choice and care rather than mere genetics. For my 33rd birthday, instead of a large celebration at an expensive restaurant, it hosted an intimate gathering at my new home. Just 12 people, each one carefully chosen for their genuine place in my life. We had laughed and talked late into the night, and not once had I felt like an afterthought at my own party. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, I closed my eyes, reflecting on the most profound lesson of my journey, that self-worth cannot be given or taken by others. My parents' approval, my sister's envy, my ex-husband's betrayal, none of these defined me. I had lost people I thought were essential to my happiness, only to discover that I was more than enough on my own. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had ultimately set me free. Free from a marriage that had subtly diminished me. Free from family dynamics that had never allowed me to be fully valued. Free from the constant striving to be good enough for people who could never truly see me. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the inexcusable or reconciling with those who had shown no remorse. It was about releasing the anger that bound me to them, about refusing to allow their actions to determine my future happiness. I had forgiven not for their benefit, but for my own peace. The worst betrayal had led me to my best self. Sometimes what feels like an ending is really the first page of a much better story. And while I wouldn't wish this pain on anyone, I was grateful for the woman I had become because of it. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you recover and rebuild? Share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even the deepest wounds can heal and lead to something beautiful. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it.